Shalom. All praises, blessings, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Racha Quadash. Double honors to my elder apostles and bishop elders of Great Millstone, who have taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy, to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom are you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed line of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom, and Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Ratazah. This lesson is edifying and informative. James chapter 5 verse 1. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord Yahweh of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doeth not resist you. Ezekiel chapter 7 verse 19. They shall cast their silver in the streets, and their gold shall be removed. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord Yahweh. They shall not satisfy their souls, neither fill their bowels, because it is the stumbling block of their iniquity. In the news from the RT, U.S. economy heading for train wreck, billionaire warns. Continued interest rate hikes, which yesterday the Fed had hiked interest rates by 25 basis points. And so now interest rates are at 5%. Rate hikes by the Fed could worsen the banking turmoil, according to Bill Ackman. I believe Bill Ackman, who is an investor, if my memory serves me correct, for BlackRock or Vanguard, one of those major funds. It says the U.S. economy is facing, and it is fading, but it says facing disaster following another interest rate increase by the Federal Reserve and the Treasury's rejection of full deposit insurance. Billionaire investor Bill Ackman has warned. When combined with the higher cost of debt, the deposits due to rising rates, consider what the impact will be on lending rates in our economy. It will evaporate liquidity, and it would also throw the economy into a recession, and then eventually a hyper depression. Okay, it says, Ackman wrote on Twitter on Wednesday, the longer this banking crisis is allowed to continue, the greater the damage to smaller banks, and that's why they've been absorbing all of these smaller banks, all these smaller regional banks. They've been absorbing all these banks into the larger banks because it will be easier for them to control and issue out their CBDC. It says, and their ability to access low cost capital. He added, the billionaire's warning follows the U.S. Central Bank's decision to raise rates by 25 basis points. On Wednesday, the Fed lifted its benchmark rate to a 4.75% to 5% range as it continues to combat inflation. Trust and confidence are earned over many years, but can be wiped out in a few days. I fear we are heading for another train wreck, and that's why all these rich men in this society that is governed and ruled by Esau, Edom, and their wicked elite are going to howl for misery and for vexation of spirit, because the Lord is about to erase all of their wealth. And all their wealth that they had amassed, they had done so through the bloodshed and the slavery of the sons and daughters of the nation of Israel. It is also written that all their goods, their gold, and all these different things that they'd gathered, that they'd consolidated, are stored up for the nation of Israel, beginning with the elect. And we can read about that in the book of Job, the 20th chapter. It reads on to say, I fear we are heading for another train wreck. Hopefully our regulators will get this right, he said. Ackman also slammed U.S. Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen for walking back plans to support depositors. Yellen, who previously made assuring comments about protecting regional banks, stated on Wednesday that she had not considered or discussed blanket insurance for U.S. banking deposits without the approval of Congress as a way of stemming the threat of further bank runs. The longer the uncertainty continues, the more permanent the damage is to the smaller banks, and the more difficult it will be to bring their consumers back, Ackman argued. Western governments and central banks have sought to prevent a cascade of bank failures after the sudden collapses earlier this month of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank in the U.S. The turmoil has also hit troubled Swiss banking giant Credit Suisse, which has been acquired by its rival, UBS. And so what we're basically seeing is consolidation of smaller banks into bigger ones. Okay, you're tightening things up. It says, in a government brokered deal aimed at shoring up public confidence in the Western financial system and averting a global crisis. And they always compete against each other, even in the stock market, between banks, funds, and they try to wipe each other out. Okay, so before I read the next article, I'll play this short clip. It's about 5 minutes or so.
Everybody admits that they have no idea what the real value is at risk. But you need to be very, very clear that the banking crisis fuse is lit. When it's going to get to the core is anybody's guess. But it's lit, and it's not going away. And to attempt to put it into some level of perception. These are right here. This is assets versus derivatives in all FDIC insured bank. And these two little buildings here, tall buildings really, are the assets, 21 trillion. But all of this and ever so much more are just the reported derivatives. How much bigger is that? My God. These are different sports fields. This is the White House. This is a person, this itty bitty little dot right there. Can you see what the problem is? And just kind of let's look at it. 128 billion in the FDIC DIF fund, and that's only because the Fed borrowed from the Treasury and loaned 148 billion to the FDIC. so that they could make good on all of those depositors, insured and uninsured. What are you worried about? Because if they saw uninsured depositors get bailed in, then maybe you're starting to think, oh, gee, maybe I'm going to get bailed in. So that's why they're doing it. It's to keep you calm. That's why they're doing it. Because they need your wealth in the system. It's far, far, far easier to take it away from you. There's 17.6 trillion in deposits at commercial banks. Bunch of that is uninsured, but hey, didn't they just show us they'll just go in and backstop everybody? And who's really supposed to pay for that? Taxpayers. That okay with you? Not okay with me. The US GDP, this is all the money that flows through the entire US.
Now, pay very close attention to what she's going to say and show here in this example.
US system is only 25 trillion. You starting to see the problem? I hope so. What we're holding, the public debt that's held.
So the U.S. annually makes about $21.1 trillion on annual. And the GDP in the year 2022 was 25 trillion. Now, the debt is over, or roughly $31 trillion. That is to say, in other words, that this country is in so much debt than it could afford, that it could handle. That's why the scripture speaks about that thick clay.
Is 31 trillion, and we're at the debt ceiling. They're going to raise that. The system is dying. I hope you can see it and make choices that puts your best interest first. Because the public debt as a percent of the GDP is 120%. 120%. And that's only just the public debt. That's not all of the debt. That's just a little bit. Can you start to see the problem? So when people say, oh, that would never happen here,
That's why when the Lord finally causes this man's systems to collapse, the rich men truly are going to howl, because it will happen so quickly, because this country is in so much debt. Well over 31 trillion. That I bought you, that thick clay.
Happening. It's happening. And by the way, Fed's already doing this. In fact, they're actually doing this. They say they're not doing it. Well, okay. Look at this. They have to do it because these banks are out of cash. Measure of cash suggests some institutions may have already reached scarcity. So the banking system is deflating. Large banks' cash equivalents as a percentage of assets, 9.5%. Small banks' cash equivalents, 6%. But don't worry, because they'll come out like they did in 2020 and say, you can withdraw as much money as you want because we'll just print more. But every time they do this, the value of what's already out there declines. So they can't fight inflation by raising rates and causing deflation if they're going to stabilize and hide what's really happening from you. I've been saying for a long time, they're between a rock and a hard place. I hope you can see it now, because it's a big rock and it's a big hard place. But don't worry, because they'll just do this, right? Discount window borrowings reached all-time high. That's the Fed's backstop, and it way surpassed what it did in 2008. There's 2020, and here's 2023. I don't know. You tell me. This is a banking crisis. It is. And it's been building. And I'm not even going to say that this has not been planned because they need a huge crisis to take us into the new system. The only way to fight.
What new system? The new system of their New World Order, when they will have everything completely digitalized and centralized through that chip, which is the MOTB. And the currency will be a central bank digital currency and not cash.
Deflation is with inflation. It's the only way. Like the only way to fight inflation is with deflation. The only way.
And so now let's get to the next article. One more article and then conclude the lesson. Germans warned of more inflation. Consumer prices will continue to rise well into the next year amid global uncertainty. An economic advisory council has said. German Council of Economic Experts (GCEE) has warned that inflation in the country could remain high for longer than expected, or even accelerate if monetary policy measures are offset by risks in financial markets. According to a report from the five-member council, high inflation will continue to inhibit the German economy this year. The GCEE expects an average inflation rate of 6.6% in 2023 and noted that while inflation peaked in the autumn of 2022, it is still significantly elevated and is likely to decline very slowly. Inflation is increasingly more broad-based. Councilmember Martin Werding wrote on Wednesday, higher producer prices and expected wage increases are likely to keep up consumer price inflation. Higher producer prices, they also call it PPI. It says are likely to keep up consumer price inflation well into the next year. The inflation rate in Germany is forecast to drop noticeably only in 2024 to 3%. According to the report, the short-term outlook for the German economy has improved slightly compared to autumn of 2022, but the situation remained strained. The inflation-induced loss of purchasing power remains the main burden for the economy in Germany and most other Euro area member states, the council stated. GCEE expects German gross domestic product (GDP) to grow by 0.2% in 2023 and by 1.3% in 2024. In other words, they expect velocity to go up. If velocity goes up, then that would be that you don't want that to happen if you want to bring inflation down. If you want to bring inflation down, the whole goal is to slow down velocity, which is the flow of money within an economy. It says the loss of purchasing power due to inflation, tighter financing conditions, and the slow recovery of foreign demand prevent a stronger upswing this year and next, said the chair of the council, Monika Schüttner. The GCEE pointed out that the high level of uncertainty in the financial markets in recent weeks has made it more difficult for central banks to counter inflation. This concludes the article, and I'll conclude reading there, and let's get the scriptures and finish the lesson. Lord, showing it was edifying. Ezekiel chapter 7, verse 25, destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. So when destruction comes in the form of the many great miseries that the Lord's going to bring upon this earth during the times of Jacob's trouble, in the forms of the four kinds written of in Jeremiah 15th chapter, many will attempt to seek peace, but there shall be none. And when they're going to be promised peace by their presidents, their governors, their mayors, their local leaders, even the leaders of our own people, that which caused them to err, and they that are led of them will be destroyed. That's when destruction will come suddenly upon them, and they shall not be able to escape, and there shall be none. It says mischief shall come upon mischief, and destruction is also going to come in the form of financial collapse. money's going to become worthless. There's going to be famine. Men shall be killing each other, their neighbors, for the lack of bread and for great tribulation. As it is written in the book of 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, it says, mischief shall come upon mischief, and rumor shall be upon rumor. Then shall they seek a vision of the prophet, but the law shall perish from the priest, and counsel from the ancients. So when these bad times come, that's when people are going to attempt to seek the Lord out, but they won't be able to find the true men of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, whom today are the elder apostles, bishop elders, elder brothers, on down to the younger men of Great Millstone, on down to men of like mind that are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad, that are teaching the true, pure, 100% doctrine of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai in truth and in sincerity. They're going to attempt to seek out the men of the Lord, but they will not be able to find the men of the Lord. And they're going to perish in their own pride, their own despair, because of their rebelliousness, their stubbornness. Okay, so with that, we'll conclude this lesson. Lord's willing, it was edifying and informative to the elect. Until the next Lord's willing, I say Shalom.